in the Maimer that the reason why the Aveda, which is more relevant to everyone, is the Aveda of Machshava, Dibra, Maisa, to discipline thought, speech, and action. And that's so much the Aveda of transforming ourselves internally, emotionally, and changing, in a sense, our essence, who we really are, to direct it towards Hashem. That's reserved for tzaddikim. But for the average person, it's thought, speech, and action. So the Maimer, with the part we learned yesterday, we explained. The part we learned yesterday explained that this is not only because thought, speech, and action is something which is accessible to every person. Changing the inner feelings, this is something which not every person has the ability to do that. But to discipline thought, speech, and action, everyone has the ability to do that. And therefore, that's the avodah of the majority of people. The Rebbe says it's deeper than that. The reason why the main avodah is through thought, speech, and action, because actually through thought, speech, and action, we can accomplish more and greater things through the actual thought, speech, and action, through the garments, more than through the emotions. And the Rebbe explains this because the garments come from a higher source. As we explained yesterday, these garments are the tools to actual making this world, the physical world, a dwelling place for Hashem. So therefore, that's the primary thing. So there's really two questions that come up. One is a question that one of the students brought up yesterday, and I said we'll talk about it today. And that is, if the main thing is action, thought, and speech, because that truly impacts this physical world, and that's what counts most, that's what's the most relevant and matters the most to Hashem, then why did he make people that are tzaddikim and they're like more involved in transforming themselves internally and developing deeper and deeper levels of feeling and love and awe and deeper understanding of Hashem? Why is there a need for that if the main thing and the primary thing that's necessary is thought, speech, and action? That was one question. The other question, which I want to ask, is that even people that are not tzaddikim, ordinary people, and certainly a person who's on the level of a Beinani, that his avodah is primarily to discipline thought, speech, and action, we're still expected to work on ourselves to develop love for Hashem, to develop a feeling of fear and awe of Hashem, and to develop a deeper emotional bond with Hashem. Why is that expected of us? Why is there a need for that if the main thing is the thought, speech, and action? So to explain this, we'll start with the first question. It says in the Medrash, something which on the surface is very difficult to understand, that we see in the Chumash, every time it talks about creation, in the beginning, it says the name Elokim. Vayom Elokim, let there be light. Let there be this, let there be that. It's all the name Elokim. In fact, it says the name Elokim is mentioned 32 times. Towards the end, when it concludes the entire story of creation, it says this is the time, the day that Hashem, Elokim, created heaven and earth. And it says both names, Hashem and Elokim. So first it says one name, and then later it says both names, Havaya and Elokim. So the Medrash says, this comes to teach us that initially Hashem's plan was to create the world with Midas Hadin, with the attribute of judgment. But then he saw that if we create the world with the attribute of judgment, things would be so difficult, so severe. A person does something wrong, they immediately get judged, and immediately there's consequences. So therefore, that would be too much. So Hashem chose to create the world with din and rachamim, both names of Hashem. The name Elokim, which is the attribute of judgment, and the name Havaya, which is the attribute of compassion. And now the world can exist. Why is this difficult to understand? Why would Hashem choose to create the world initially with the attribute of din, of judgment? Hashem is the epitome of kindness, infinite kindness, something which is beyond human comprehension. Hashem is all good. There's nothing negative, chas v'shalom, within Hashem. In fact, there's a pasuk where it says the whole world was created with chesed, olam chesed yibana. So if Hashem has to choose with which attribute to create the world, I would assume, that would be the attribute of kindness and compassion. And here we're saying the opposite. Now, initially, Hashem wanted to create the world with the attribute of judgment. But because he saw that people won't be able to handle it, it'll be too strict, so therefore he joined it with the attribute of compassion. How can we understand that? So the answer is, when we talk about the attribute of the Elokim, it doesn't mean judgment. It really, in Chassidus, Elokim is the name of Hashem that is the source of tzimtzum, contraction and concealment. And that means that initially, Hashem wanted to create the world in such a way that there is his name, his presence is concealed exclusively. And then he chose to join it with the name Havaya, which means not just kindness, it means the revelation of godliness, that things should not be just concealed completely, that it should also be revealed. There's a mashal in the Medrash of a king that he wanted to put liquid into a glass. And he said, if I put this liquid, wine or oil or whatever it is, in this glass, and the liquid is cold, then the glass will be not clean. It'll get stuck to the glass and it won't be clean. If I put in liquid that's hot, then the glass will crack or break. So what did he do? He mixed the hot and the cold together, and now it wasn't breaking and it wasn't becoming not clean because there's also warm water there. And what's the mashal? That Hashem said, if I create the world only with the attribute of chesed, kindness, then people would just take advantage and they would commit sin because there's no consequences. If I would create the world only with the attribute of judgment, then people wouldn't be able to handle it. It would be too strict. So therefore Hashem joined the two together. There should be this balance between judgment and compassion, and that's the way the world can exist in a stable way. So again, the way Chassidus explains this is as follows. That initially Hashem wanted to create the world with concealment. Why? Because that's the whole purpose of creation. The whole purpose of creation is God wanted to make a dwelling place here in the lower worlds. What does it mean, the lower worlds? It's not lower geographically speaking, because there's no space when you talk about Hashem and the spiritual worlds. So it's not the spiritual worlds is in one geographic location, and this world is in a lower geographic location. So what does lower mean? Lower means in terms of godliness, less revealed, more concealed. So therefore Hashem created humans. The definition of a human is not just someone who has organs and veins and eyes and nose and mouth. Definition of a human, let's say, versus a malach, an angel, or human versus a neshamah, a soul, is someone who is physical, sees the world through physical eyes, and relates to the world in the natural way. And that's the definition of a human being. In other words, someone who godliness is not revealed to them. They don't see godliness in a natural way. They don't feel godliness in a natural way. What we see and what we feel and what we sense is physicality in ourselves and physicality around us. That's the definition of a human being. And Hashem wanted that this human being who's so physical, nevertheless, he will make himself and the world a dwelling place for Hashem. So therefore, we can understand that initially the plan is that the world should be concealed godliness. But if the world is going to be totally concealed godliness, then it wouldn't be possible for us to accomplish our mission, which is to transform it and make it into a dwelling place for Hashem. Because godliness is going to be so concealed, we won't be able to make it into a dwelling place for Hashem. We'll be overwhelmed by the concealment of godliness. So we won't have that sensitivity, that feeling, that drive for godliness, because everything is concealed. So therefore Hashem said we have to join this with the name Havaya, which is revealed godliness. And Hashem reveals godliness in this world, so even though we're humans, we can still do the avodah of transforming the world. What is that? For example, the miracles that Hashem performs, the miracles that we see that are written in the Chumash, the miracles that happen throughout the ages. These miracles reveal godliness to us, and as a result of that, we're able to have that sensitivity, able to have that feeling and that drive, and transform the world into a godly place and elevate ourselves. And that's also what Hashem gave us the Torah. The Torah reveals godliness. Learning the Torah, we perceive Hashem's wisdom, and that's how we see more godliness in the world. Hashem gave us tzaddikim. So therefore, when we ask a question, why did Hashem create people like tzaddikim or neviim? A navi speaks to Hashem. Why not everybody speak to Hashem? And if that's not what Hashem wants, then why did He create individuals that do speak to Him? It's the same thing. If every person would be someone that could speak directly to Hashem, and Hashem speaks directly to him, that's not the human being that Hashem wanted to create. That's a spiritual person, not a physical human being of flesh and blood. The definition of a physical human being is a person who sees the world in a physical way, not in a spiritual way. He doesn't have that ability. And the whole purpose is that that person should transform the world. But on the other hand, if everybody in the world would be just the way ordinary humans are, there'd be nobody in the world like a Navi or a Tzaddik that sees godliness in a more open way. It wouldn't be possible for the rest of the world to do their Avodah properly. It would be too much concealment. So Hashem created a place in the world where godliness is revealed. And this is the tzaddikim. These are the prophets who openly spoke to Hashem, performed miracles, told us about the future or the past or what's going on in heaven, openly revealing godliness. And that enables all of us, even though we're ordinary humans, to have a greater and better sense and a higher sense of consciousness and awareness of godliness of Hashem, and we could serve Him in a proper way. And that's the balance that Hashem wants.
Rabbi Majeski, do you see the question that came up?
No. Sorry.
The question is, how come some people, regular people, are more sensitive to spirituality, just naturally? And this person is saying that they feel more spiritual than other people, and it's something that is well known about them.
Well, it's for the same reason, that even though the majority of people don't have that super sensitivity, in order to keep the balance in the world the right way, Hashem created tzaddikim, He created prophets, and He also created ordinary people that should have maybe more of a measure of spiritual sensitivity than others. And by having that sort of mixture, ordinary people and these kind of people together, the world is in a balanced way. Let me give another example of a similar idea. It was a story that there was a man who was a supporter of the yeshiva of Chabad in Lubavitch, in the city of Lubavitch, in the generation of the Rebbe Rashab. And one day he decided to come and visit the yeshiva and observe himself the students. And it's known the students in the yeshiva of Lubavitch were on a much higher level, and they were totally immersed in their learning and their davening. And when he came there, he was found it to be very impressive. Young boys learning and davening all day. rather learning all day, spending a lot of time on davening. And he saw that these boys are so immersed, they're totally unaware and they don't care about what's going on in the rest of the world. On one hand, that was impressive. On the other hand, he felt, but practically, you can't live like that. Ultimately, they're going to go out of yeshiva, they're going to have to get married, build a family, go to work. So they're not going to be like so immersed and totally removed from the rest of the world. So what's the point? And he presented his question to the Rebbe Rashab. And the Rebbe Rashab said to him, tell me, do you have a fireplace in your house? Yes. How hot is it in that room where the fire is burning? And he said, let's say 80 degrees heat. So the Rebbe Rashab said to him, and how hot is it in the other room, the fourth room from the fireplace? And he said, well, over there it's like 40 degrees. And he asked him, if that's the case, if it's going to be 40 degrees anyway, why do you put the fire up to 80 in the room where the fireplace is? Why don't you put it up to 40? He was puzzled by the question. But respectfully, he said to the Rebbe Rashab, well, if the room with the fireplace would be 40, then the other room, which is 4 rooms away, would be 10 degrees. It would be cold. So the Rebbe Rashab said the same here. There's no doubt that a yeshiva student's fire, passion, involvement in Torah and Chassidus and spirituality, when he's in yeshiva, is going to be much greater than anything that will happen later in life. But if in yeshiva he's immersed and his passion is 100%, then we know later when he goes out into the world, cannot be the same, but it'll be balanced. It'll be to a degree where it's appropriate. But if when in his yeshiva it's not going to be 100%, it'll be 40%, 50%. Then when he goes out, it's not going to be 50%. Then it could be very cold, 10% of passion and so on. So in other words, the ultimate goal is the balance, to be out into the world and be part of society and at the same time be connected spiritually. But in order for that to happen in the right balance, there has to be that period before you go out into the world where you're totally immersed and your passion is 100%. And then when you go out, you can have the proper balance. And this is the same thing with Shabbos and the 6 days of the week. The ultimate goal is not that every single day should be Shabbos. Hashem wants 6 weekdays for the same reason. He wants a physical world where people are plowing in the fields, people are going to work, people are doing business and business interactions, human beings eating and doing everything that humans do. But at the same time, it should be permeated with spirituality, with godliness. How's that possible? So we go to work and we serve Hashem. But if we would do that every single day, 7 days a week, then it wouldn't last. Ultimately, we'd be cooled off. So Hashem says you have to take 1 day, like the fireplace, which is Shabbos. And on that day, you're totally immersed in spirituality. We don't go to work. We don't do all the mundane things. So we spend our time primarily with davening and learning and family. And then we can expect that the next 6 days, there's going to be the proper balance. And that's the same principle with the world. Hashem wants a world of people that are balanced. And that's the majority of people in this world, ordinary humans, and yet learning and davening and loving Hashem and having a passion for Torah and mitzvahs. That's the ultimate goal. But if there would be only such people, it wouldn't last. There wouldn't be a balance. We'd be cooled off. So Hashem created people that by them and in their world, godliness is revealed. And the tzaddikim that we spoke about, they are actually able to transform themselves internally, emotionally, and they're on fire with the greatest feeling of love and feelings for Hashem. And that enables the rest of us to have at least that balance. And regarding the second question, why does a Beinoni even try to work on developing the deeper feeling? And the answer is because if he would just do mitzvahs and Torah, thought, speech, and action, just technical, then it would be like a body without a soul. So he also makes an effort to have more of a feeling. His feelings are relatively more superficial compared to the tzaddik, but still it enhances the thought, enhances the speech, enhances the action, that it's not dead, it has life to it, and that life is the love and fear of Hashem. By tzaddikim, their love and fear of Hashem is at a much higher level. It's not only to enhance the action, it's sort of a way of serving Hashem in its own merit, just loving Hashem, feeling fear of Hashem as an end goal in itself, not just to enhance and to bring life into the thought, speech, and action. Is it understood? Any questions? Okay, I assume that there aren't any questions and it's understood, so therefore we shall continue. So we're on the last page, page 37, 38, 39. The paragraph that begins with Zehu. In English, this is why. Zehu mashikar avodas ha'adam hisur meraba seitei b'pel mamish. And this is why the primary avodah of a person is sur merah, to not to move away and stay away from doing something negative, v'aseitei, and to do the things that are positive. Turn away from evil and do good, which means observing the mitzvahs aseh, the positive commandments, and observing the mitzvahs loiseh, those commandments which are negative, not to do things. And that the main thing is in actuality, machshava, dibra, maisa. Ki hakavon, the biridis and neshama lamata, because the purpose of the neshama coming down to this world, ibridei shaydei avedasa lamata, by coming down to this physical world, tis'ala l'mayla yoser, it'll rise to a level which is so much higher, mashahaya, mashihi mitzad atzma, higher than the way the soul was before, koydem yuridasa, before it descended. There are many Maimarim and Chassidus that start off with the question, Lama yarda neshama lamata, why did the neshama come down? What's the question? The life of a neshama before the neshama comes down is on a very high level. It's surrounded only by godliness. There's nothing else there other than godliness, souls and angels and godly light. And the soul is occupied with understanding Hashem and experiencing feelings of love and fear of Hashem. And basically the soul is there for thousands of years since the world was created. And the soul is experiencing all these great things. Then Hashem takes that soul and sends it down to a physical world, which is so low, invested into a nefesh bahamis, an animal soul, which sort of restrains it from being the way it wants to be. And then it goes into a physical body, which is even more physical, more material. So basically the soul is just going through a descent. For the soul, this is just going down. So the answer is, but the purpose is through this descent, the neshama will go up to a much, much higher level. A higher level than it was even in Shemayim before it came down. It's interesting that actually there are two answers brought down in Chassidus. They're both true, they're just two different perspectives. In some places it says, why did the neshama come down? And gives the answer, the neshama didn't come down for its own purpose. The neshama came down, the sakyan es haguf, to correct and elevate and transform the body and the nefesh bahamis. That's its purpose. But in itself, really, it's a descent. And the only reason it goes down is to help the physical body and the nefesh bahamis to be elevated. Then in other places it says the neshama came down in order for it to have a higher aliyah, to be able to rise to a much higher level. Like the mashal that's given of a tree. Then when you take a tree, a high, tall tree, and you bend it down, bring it down to the ground. In fact, this is a story in Tanakh with one of the generals in the Jewish army. I remember this was in times of David HaMelech or Shlomo HaMelech, that he needed to get into a city, but the wall was a very big wall, tall wall, couldn't get over the wall. So they went into the forest, which is before the city. They took a tree, bent it down to the ground, and this general sat down on the tree, and then they let go. And when they let go, he went flying into the city, and eventually he conquered the city, because that's how he got in. So here you're taking a tree that's very tall, you bend it down, and in fact, the further down you bring it, the higher up it shoots after you bring it down. So that is a muscle that sometimes when you go down, the purpose is actually to go up and go up higher than what you could do on your own. So the Neshamah was already up on a high place. The Neshamah is in Shemayim, around Hashem, totally surrounded with godliness. But nevertheless, when the Neshamah comes down to this world, which is a lower place, much lower, by doing that, the Neshamah comes down, it's invested in the animal soul in the body, and through thought, speech, and action does Torah and mitzvahs. And through this, the Neshamah rises spiritually to a place which is much, much greater than where it was before. Let's see the words inside. So the reason why the Neshamah comes down, Lamata, Tis'ala Lamaila Yesa, it should be elevated to a higher level, more than the Neshama is in its own right. It becomes higher than it was before it descended. How is this elevation accomplished? This elevation is mainly through thought, speech, and action. Just like the garments in the literal sense, we said before that when a person puts on garments and puts on beautiful garments, decent garments, not only are the garments beautiful, but it beautifies the person, it enhances the person. The person is seen in a much better light because they're wearing these beautiful garments. That means that the Neshama is invested in the garments, thought, speech, and action. But through the garments, the Neshama now attains a higher level of godliness, higher than it had when it was in this world. Higher than it had when it was up there in the spiritual world. So regarding the two reasons that are given, did the Neshama come down for itself so it can rise to a much higher level? Or the Neshama came down in order to be masakin the guf, mainly to transform the body and the animal soul? So in some places it says, first of all, there's no question, both things are true. But what's really the ultimate goal? So some place it explains that the ultimate goal of the Neshama coming down is not for itself, it's really to transform the Nefesh Habahamis and the Guf and this physical world, to fulfill the purpose of making the world a dwelling place to Hashem. But the reward that the Neshama gets for doing this, doing something for others, is that the Neshama itself reaches a much higher level. I guess it's like tzedakah. When you give tzedakah to another person, basically, you're doing this not for yourself, you're doing it to help the other person, to give them food, give them clothing, help them find an apartment where they can live. So you're doing this that this person should be having their needs and be happier. But the Torah says, because you did that, you will actually be rewarded in a way that you will have much more than you would have had you not given that other person. There are people that are afraid that if they give tzedakah, they give their money to someone else, they're going to have less and they'll be lacking. And the Torah tells us, no, the opposite is true. That actually by giving to someone else, you will be able to rise to a much higher level and have much more bracha in your life than you would have had otherwise. And this is what it means that Yericha is considered the Locke of Eretz Yisrael. As we explained in the beginning of the Maimer, that the Locke means just like in a house, you have a door, and through the door, that's how you get into the house. Once you get in through the door, you have access to the whole building. But how do you get in through the door? You have to unlock that lock. So basically, the lock on that front door is what opens up everything else. Yericha was considered the lock of the land of Israel. So by conquering Yericha, that made the rest of Eretz Yisrael accessible. How is that in reference to the way we explained the Maimer? Through this Aveda of turning away from negative and doing the positive, practically, the Machshava Dibra Maisa, to be totally in control and discipline with my thought, speech, and action. And especially if we not only do things in thought, speech, and action, but we do the Aveda of Meraglim. What is a Meragel? A spy. He goes to the place to scout out and sort of examine what's doing there. What are the strong points? What are the weak points? And that information will help conquer. So spiritually, it means Lasur v'livchen es machshava dibra ma'isa, to examine my thought and my speech and my action, sheyakulam lavaya, that they should be properly the way they're supposed to be, directed to Hashem. So in other words, not only is it important just to do thought, speech, and action, but from time to time, a person has to sit down and examine themselves and go over and think, how is my thought and how is my speech and how is my action? And if I'm doing things right, do I have to improve them? There's something that I can add, and so on and so forth. So that process of self-examination and reflecting upon things myself will enhance the quality of my thought, speech, and action. Ultimately, through this Aveda, we'll be able to reach the higher level of Aveda, to elevate and to refine and transform the Midas, which is to conquer the land of all 7 nations. Ultimately, not only will we be able to conquer the land of the 7 nations, we'll also be able to conquer the land of the 3 nations. We know that there's another part that belongs and it's designated for the Yidden to be part of Eretz Yisrael, but it never happened yet. And this is going to happen once Mashiach comes. And these places are 3 places, and they're called Keni, Knizi, V'Kadmoni. It means that ultimately there are 10 nations that are going to be conquered and transformed. But now, until Mashiach comes, we don't have the ability to transform the 10, only the 7. And that's why the Rebbe says, first we start off with thought, speech, and action, Yericha, just the thought, speech, and action. Then from there we get to able to conquer the 7 and even the 3, because when Mashiach comes, we'll be at a much higher level and be able to conquer all of Eretz Yisrael. What are the 3? Gimel Meichen. The 7 nations represent the 7 emotional attributes to be transformed that into Kedusha. And the 3 represent Chochmah, Bina, and Das, the 3 intellectual attributes, and that will be totally transformed in a complete way only once Mashiach comes. B'bias Mashiach Tzadkeinu b'Korav Mamash. So I guess one of the main points that we take away from this Maimer is to recognize that the main purpose and main goal and what's mainly and primarily expected of me, what Hashem wants of me, is to discipline thought, speech, and action. Because very often we do try to develop more deeper feeling, And sometimes we don't get there, we get very frustrated. And as a result of getting frustrated, we sort of give up on making the effort. And then as a result of that, we give up making the effort even for thought, speech, and action. So we have to remember, no, the main thing is what Hashem wants is thought, speech, and action. So if there is a mitzvah of Avos Yisrael, and I say to myself, but I don't feel that I love this other Jewish person. I don't feel that Avos Yisrael in my heart. So what's the point? And the answer is, even if you don't feel, but you can act in a way of Avos Yisrael, doing a favor to that person, definitely not doing anything which is going to be hurtful, even if you feel that way because of some reason. And the same with speech. Say something positive to make another person feel better, to bring a person more joy, give a person a compliment, and not to say something which is negative. Lashon hara, speaking bad about a person, or embarrassing someone, insulting them, or saying something which is hurtful verbally. And the same thing with thought, not to entertain my mind with thoughts of hate or thoughts of thinking about hurting someone or thinking what I would say to that person, which would be hurtful. In other words, that is something that all of us can accomplish, that in thought, speech, and action, I'll have Avos Yisrael. Even though internally I don't feel it. But Hashem is telling us that this is the main thing that counts, thought, speech, and action. Sure, if I can work on myself to internally feel more that love, and there are many stories of people that's the way they were. Their Avos Yisrael wasn't just action, it was in their heart. Like the Frierdiker Rebbe uses an example, and halavai there would be many people that are on that level, that a person walks down the street, and he has a lot of things on his mind, weighing him down, different problems, whether it's health problems or other problems, and he's really feeling the weight of it, and then he suddenly meets a friend of his. He meets a friend, and at that moment, he just breaks into a smile. He's so happy to meet this person. He forgets about all the things that he was just worried about and thinking about. In other words, this is Avos Yisrael. That's not just thought, speech, and action. There's actually a feeling in the heart. Such a strong feeling that when this Avos Yisrael, this love for another Yid, rises to the surface, it's so overwhelming that he forgets about all the things that are bothering him personally. And the same is with all other character traits, that the main thing is to do the mitzvah in actuality. And yes, as much as we can work on developing the emotion, the feeling, it's a positive thing, but to realize that the main thing is what we have. And even though it seems to be frustrating, like what's the point if I can't really, it's only on the outside, let's remember, but that's the way Hashem created us, to be humans, and that's what gives him pleasure. There's a famous mashal from the Mezritcha Magid that explains this. He gives a mashal of a person that needed to have he needed to present a request to the king, whether he was in trouble and he needed to defend himself, or I think that's the mashal, someone who was in trouble, and they gave him the opportunity to stand in front of the king and try to defend himself. And what he did was something very interesting. He took a parakeet, a bird, and he trained the bird to say this beautiful speech, talk to the king about how great he is and how compassionate he is and how much he loves him and how he's such a great king, and then to present his request that the king should cancel the punishment and should forgive him. And the parakeet was speaking like this brilliant, intelligent person, presented an amazing presentation of a case. And the king was laughing through the whole way through. And at the end, he waved his hand and said, okay, you're free, you're okay. And the Mezritcha Magid said, what if this wouldn't have been a parakeet? This would have been this person speaking. It wouldn't have had that effect on the king. The reason why it had an effect on the king is because this is something which is a chiddush. It's something which is a novelty, that a parakeet, a bird, should speak so intelligently That was something which moved the king, and therefore he canceled it. In other words, pleasure comes when you see something which is not expected and something which is a novelty. Same as with Hashem. Hashem gets pleasure from tzaddikim. He gets pleasure from angels serving him. He gets pleasure from all the souls in Gan Eden that are serving him. But the greatest pleasure that Hashem has is from humans of flesh and blood while they're here in this physical world. And under these circumstances, like the bird, to be able to daven, learn, do mitzvahs, help other Yidden, and serve Hashem practically through thought, speech, and action, this is the greatest pleasure to Hashem, because this is something which is the biggest chiddush, that a human being of flesh and blood can do all these things. That's the definition of a dwelling place here in this physical world. So that's the point in the Maimer, and therefore every one of us is expected to conquer Yerichai, but not necessarily to conquer all of Eretz Yisrael, but eventually we'll get there as well. There's still one thing that I want to talk about tomorrow regarding this subject, and then Monday, Emeritus Hashem, will start a new Maimer. Okay, all the best, everybody. Have a Hatzlacha Dekadei.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.